At ParentingU, we believe a fed baby is best. This episode is geared towards moms who choose a breastfeeding journey. But whatever journey you choose for your family, we hope to be there to support you and help you along the way. Hi, welcome back to ParentingU. I'm Stephanie, and we're here to help you on this amazing journey we call parenting. Today is all about breastfeeding, and so we're welcoming Dr. Gregory Gelpi, a pediatrician with Our Lady of the Lake Children's Health, and Becca Miller, a lactation consultant and speech-language pathologist with Our Lady of the Lake Children's Hospital. Welcome.
Thank you.
They're going to give us all the things we need to know about breastfeeding, tips for expecting moms, just everything we might need to know about breastfeeding. You guys ready?
Yeah.
We are.
All right. Dr. Gelpi, why don't we start with you? Will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I've been in general pediatrics here in Baton Rouge for the last 30 years, and maybe 10 to 12 years ago, I became more interested in public health and population health. And unfortunately, the state of Louisiana ranks close to last in breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. And so I became very interested in learning about breastfeeding. So I did a separate credentialing called IBCLC, which is an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So I could become more of an expert in the field, so I could be more of help, not only to the moms, but also to other clinicians who may not be trained in breastfeeding support.
That's so great. And welcome back. This is a return visit to the podcast for you. So we're so glad to have you back.
Thanks.
Becca, what about you? Tell us about what you do.
So by trade, I am a speech language pathologist that I went to school for 2 years for grad school, and then I found out that during my graduate program, there's such a connection between oral motor feeding and lactation that I was like, lactation, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to feed babies and teach mom how to feed babies the rest of my life. So kind of like Dr. Gelpi, I went to get extra certification, but I am a certified lactation consultant. So not quite as advanced as Dr. Gelpi, but I am one step below him, teaching our families and our moms how to successfully breastfeed and how to just bond with their babies, because that is their one thing that they can do as a mom to build some rapport and build a connection with them to feed their babies.
That's awesome. Well, good. Well, let's just jump right in. Why is it so important to breastfeed? What is the importance of breast milk, and how do you recommend moms go about making that decision?
Mom's own milk is so important. That milk is alive. It's alive with organisms, with antibodies, with nutrient, protein. And by giving that to the baby, it helps so much with their immunity. It has dramatically decreased bacterial infections, ear infections, pneumonia, bladder infections. It's amazing what it does. Viruses are pretty smart. So babies still get viruses with breastfeeding. But for instance, the RSV bronchiolitis, which everyone is afraid about, they'll get that, but they don't get quite as sick. And those kids oftentimes do not become asthmatic. Breastfeeding, the babies can get very chunky. Now, some are somewhat wiry, but some get really chunky. And they become healthy, very fit kids.
Yeah.
Where overfed formula babies become very overweight, and they have a tendency to get stuck with their overweight and their obesity. So it is truly the fountain of youth that is right in front of us, and we have missed it. The combination of the immunization campaign and breast milk has really turned the pediatrician into more wellness coaches, where we used to do many septic workups because the babies were on formula. We don't see that as much. And so it's been a blessing. Breast milk is very important for the GI tract, which makes sense. With formula, they have to put all these babies on probiotics. With breastfeeding, the probiotics are in the mom's milk. It's the best probiotic, which is human milk. They have decreased incidence of gastroenteritis, diarrhea, And there is a condition called necrotizing enterocolitis, called NEC. That has really decreased that babies that get human milk. Also, sudden infant death syndrome. Now that we recommend that babies sleep on their back, and if they get human milk, we don't see sudden infant death syndrome anymore. So it's amazing, everything. There are studies on babies' IQs. There are studies on their future health as far as cardiac, lung, decreased incidence of development of diabetes. It goes on and on and on.
Wow. It's kind of like the mom's immune system is teaching the baby's immune system through the breast milk.
Right. So whatever illnesses the mom picks up, she is creating antibodies. For instance, with coronavirus, mom gets coronavirus. She's producing antibodies. We recommend that she breastfeeds through her coronavirus. She's producing antibodies which are passing through the breast milk, which is helping develop immunity in the baby.
So you mentioned formula. Why do you feel like formula was created based off of cow's milk instead of what we knew about human milk? And why do you feel like culture has changed back to really focusing on breastfeeding?
So naturally, the formulas were developed initially if a mom could not breastfeed, the baby would die unless we could find a donor mom or a nursemaid to feed the baby. So along the line, we developed artificial formulas that were based on cow's milk because that was readily available. It's harder to get human milk. Now, we are starting to develop human milk donors, and we do use that oftentimes, human milk that is pasteurized, and we use it mainly in the newborn or neonates, the preemies, because it's very hard to get volume since it's not readily available.
So tell me, what kind of support can moms expect in our hospitals? And what support is available even after baby comes home?
So there's a lot of support that the Children's Hospital provides to the families that are breastfeeding. We provide pumps to all of our moms. We provide meal tickets for our moms that are breastfeeding to make sure that they stay hydrated and fed while they're here, because that's stressful when your baby's in the hospital. The last thing you want to worry about is how am I going to get fed today. I am on all the floors of the hospital, so I go make rounds with all the moms and make sure and just sit with them and listen and figure out what's going on, where the breastfeeding, is it hurting, is it the baby not latching, is it that she doesn't feel like she has enough milk, and we talk through all of those different things. Once the baby gets discharged and they're better and they can go home, I do offer some outpatient visits as well, so parents can call and be like, okay, Becca, this isn't working, or hey, it's going great. If it's not working, then we sit down and get another plan of action together, and we start from square one again to figure out how to make her successful, and make her breastfeeding journey the journey that she wants to ride.
That's so important, and I think those types of services we offer at all of our hospitals that are birthing babies, that are supporting babies, that our pediatricians are trained in that, so that knowing at such a process that it is, that no matter where you're having a baby within our system, you're getting the support that you need.
And don't be afraid. And if you're a parent, don't be afraid to ask for more support. Sometimes when these babies come in and they're in PICU or they're in the NICU, everybody's so focused on the baby. Be a parent and advise for yourself and say, hey, I need some help, because all of our pediatricians, all of our doctors, whether it be in PICU, med, surge, they want to help you too as well to make you successful.
Well, and let me ask you one other thing about after baby comes home, a lactation consultant can really support mom and dad or the whole family. When it's 2 a.m. and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, these consultants can be a phone call away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And know that whenever you need it, all you have to do is ask.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about mom and baby. What about dads? What can we do for them who may not feel connected because they're not able to feed or just aren't having the same amount of time with the baby? What can we do for them, and how can we support them in this journey?
So I think, obviously, dad is a very important part of the team. And for mom to be successful, he has to be very supportive. and he can participate. Obviously, we recommend moms doing skin to skin, but we have dads doing skin to skin also, which is almost like the baby being in a good environment of heat, and that's good bonding too. But the dad can be very active in support because with all the different techniques of breastfeeding, the more hands that can be present can help mom with her breastfeeding journey. So the more that dad can be educated and more understanding that he has is definitely a plus. And it is very important that he support the mom, because if he is working or says, oh, don't worry about it, just give your the baby formula, the mom has more of a tendency to give up.
Yeah. And he can go get some of the water that we need to drink, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And he can be there when things go wrong. You know, when they have lumps in their breast. I teach dads all the time to massage mom's breast to make sure that they're opening up the milk ducts. Or know the signs that if she has mastitis, are her breasts hot? Like, be an advocate for mom when she's frantic and is crying and, you know, can't get baby to latch. He can be that emotional support system as well.
And Becca, why do you feel like this is so important? You mentioned bonding. What is it about breastfeeding that bonds, in addition to all the great things in the data that shows the goodness inside the milk, but what about the bonding between mom and baby?
So it's really important that breastfeeding is like 100% reliant on mom's hormones. And to produce really good milk, you need that hormones of the prolactin and the oxytocin. Having a baby on your skin, giving skin to skin, having them nuzzle on you, all of that's really important to just build a psychological and emotional bond between baby and mom.
Well, let's talk about the breastfeeding journey. What are some of the milestones? So you hear about kind of the first 24 hours, maybe the first few months. You hear the elusive breastfeed up to a year. What are the important milestones and what should mom expect?
So the three aspects are, one is to try to offer our moms prenatal education, because we could spend a week talking about this breastfeeding because it gets very complicated. Many times the mom is not aware of anything until she delivers. And then it's like, well, you just had a baby. Now we have to spend 5 hours trying to learn how to breastfeed. The more she knows going in, the better. And then she needs to be supported at the hospital when she's there, and then she needs very good close follow-up after. It takes about 2 weeks to get your milk supply in. It takes 3 days to start getting your let down. You have colostrum for the first 3 days. But if the mom doesn't know that, she has a feeling that she's not feeding her baby.
She may get frustrated.
She's only making a small volume of colostrum, which is totally normal. But unless she's aware of that, she becomes more anxious, and it puts more stress upon herself. What I tell the moms is, it's not easy, but once you get it, you got it. So it takes about, if they give it the 2 weeks and stay with it and they have good follow-up, they can get it. But unfortunately, when they get home, oftentimes there's a case of formula that is there at their doorstep, and it's very easy to say, I can't do this, and once they give the formula, they have a tendency to crash and burn as far as getting their full production.
Sure. And what would you say to moms who are struggling? Because you mentioned, sometimes you have to give it the 2 weeks. Sometimes people struggle beyond the 2 weeks. How do we talk with moms about the anxiety that comes with it, but also that they are not a failure and that this is a process?
I think one thing in our community is we just have to normalize that breastfeeding is difficult, but it's something that all moms can do. And I think that if we have the education, the prenatal education, and we have the education in the hospital to be a support system for these moms that may not have a good support system at home, I think that's one way we can get more breastfeeding awareness and saying, hey, this is difficult, but we're going to work with you and we're going to be there in the tough times, or we'll be there to educate you when you're at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're like, I don't know if I'm feeding my baby enough. Well, you are feeding your baby enough because of that colostrum, and that's giving the baby enough to survive the next day. And just tell them it's going to be a while, but we're going to be here.
I think that's so important, and probably with anything about pregnancy, parenthood, motherhood, it all just looks so easy on TV. And it's not. It is so hard, and it is a process, and you learn along the way. But having people in your corner like y'all is super helpful. What are some other pain points? We talked about just anxiety about, is it happening? Am I feeding enough? What are some other pain points that mothers might experience?
I think it's like a lot of parents that come to me, it's like it hurts. Like breastfeeding really shouldn't hurt that much. Like it should be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. Or you feel the baby sucking on you, absolutely. But you shouldn't be bleeding. You shouldn't have cracked nipples. You shouldn't have like lumps in your breast. I think that's one thing that's really hard for moms when they do have that and they have nowhere to go. So it's for us as providers to be like, let's work past these little humps to get you breastfeeding successfully. Because if a mom is hurting when breastfeeding, they're not going to be successful. And they're going to want to they're going to want to give up.
So another issue is we're going sometimes 3 and 4 generations of not breastfeeding. So if your mother breastfed you, you have more tendency to breastfeed your child. We have got to break the cycle. And so that's where it's so much more difficult to break the cycle, because once we get one mom doing it, then her kids will breastfeed. So you need a really good team. So the grandmother who did not breastfeed, she doesn't have enough expertise. So they are working as naysayers against these new moms who have not breastfed before. And where the postpartum depression is made better by breastfeeding, it's worse in the beginning because it takes about 2 weeks to get it all together. So where initially it seems like it makes it worse, if they can get it, it'll make everything better.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, and this may be hard without visuals, but what are some common ways to breastfeed? What are some common holds? What should mom expect? Is it, and like we said earlier, it doesn't look as easy as it is on TV, so you might not have this glow about you as you're doing it, but what are some common ways you hold and you breastfeed?
So there's actually a couple that are really great. One is called the cradle hold, which is literally you're just cradling your baby, tummy to mommy, to try to get the baby to latch properly. Sometimes that's really uncomfortable for moms to cradle. So you can also do a side lying position where you can lay on your bed and have the baby laying tummy to you right next to you. That's actually one of the slowest positions to put the baby because of the fact that that milk is pooling in their cheek before it's forced to go down their throat and swallow. So at nighttime, that's actually a perfect position to put them in when they're tired and their oral motor and their swallowing isn't working as well as it was during the day. Another position that you can put them in is kind of just leaning back just a little bit and having them tummy to you on top. Moms find that really comfortable, especially if a mom had a C-section, to just lay down just a little bit and just have the baby right on top of your breast.
Oh, interesting. So there's no one right way.
No, absolutely not. Whatever is more comfortable for you and whatever is more comfortable for baby, that's the breastfeeding position that I would tell you to use as a lactation consultant.
Yeah. Well, and how long does a nursing session usually last? Like, what should we expect?
You know, of interest, those first 3 days, we tell the moms, let's work on different positioning, because you have a 72-hour window that if we get that good suck, swallow, breathe, the tongue's coming out, the upper lip is flanging up, they get a good suck, swallow, breathe, by 72 hours the milk comes in. So initially in the first 3 days, it's not about volume. But then once the milk comes in, usually about 20 minutes per breast, but we always stress don't watch the clock. So technically, like I tell them in the beginning, because their nipples do get sore, is I'm not worried too much about volume. It's just the baby's mouth contact to your breast. And we do a lot of hand massage too, which works very good to kind of stimulate the breast. But usually around 20 minutes and 20 minutes. Once they become efficient, they may do 15 on one breast, 5 on the other. It depends on how efficient they are in draining the breast.
So it can vary. Got it. Well, what are some tips for new moms who are nursing to take care of themselves? Are there things that moms can do to help stimulate breast milk, to make sure they get enough of the right nourishment and are just healthy for that part of their life?
I think a lot of it comes back to if you are giving from an empty cup, it will not flow as well as if you're giving from a full cup. So it's sleep. It's making sure you're staying hydrated. You should be drinking at least 16 cups of water a day, which is about 128 ounces of water.
That's a lot. I've tried that
lot.
before, and that's a lot.
It is. But think about it whenever you're eating like a watermelon. Technically, that is still liquid intake.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can drink 10 ounces of water and then just have some fruit that's liquidized to aid with that water intake. Make sure you're eating. Like, you need to be eating like 330 to 400 calories more a day when you're breastfeeding than when you were pregnant or just not breastfeeding at all, which could be as simple as a bagel with some peanut butter or something that's a protein and a cracker. Make sure you're hydrating yourself and making sure you're eating and making sure you're sleeping. Those are really important to keep your milk production up as well.
Yeah, those are good tips. Well, let's talk about some of the problems that a mom may face breastfeeding. What are some concerns or maybe things you see in your practice that may be concerning to moms?
So initially, with a first-time mom, a lot of times it's 90% of the time it's difficult. Now, they can get it, but they have to stay with it.
Yeah.
But the second and third baby, it's 10% where it's difficult.
Yeah.
Even though they may have failed the first time, it becomes much easier the second and third time. So what we try to do is encourage them is that what you're experiencing is normal, and we have to try to work out the different ways to get through this, but not to give up. We have all kind of little things, nipple shells, which help with aeration, nipple shields, which help the baby latch on, trying to see if they're tongue-tied or lip-tied. And so that's where that close follow-up is very important. If they don't get appropriate follow-up, they will either quit or the doctor tells them to quit, which usually does not have to be done, but typically they can get it if they can stay with it. But I think if they understand that going in, it's much better, because a lot of times they think they just can put the baby on the chest, I'm just going to breastfeed, and it's not that easy in the beginning.
What about, so some things that, we've heard through the years, mastitis or clogged ducts or things like that. What are some tips on those that moms can be on the lookout for?
I feel like if you're a mom and you're breastfeeding and your breasts are hard or they're hot to the touch, or if you're seeing white pimples on your areola, like those are things that like scream, hey, I need some better assistance.
Yeah.
A lot of the times some of the things can be fixed at home, whether you add heat to open up your milk ducts to try to get that milk flowing again, or just more hand massaging or pumping a little bit more frequently. Sometimes moms don't pump every 2 to 3 hours or breastfeed every 2 to 3 hours, and then they go 4 and 5 hours at night and they wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, my breasts are like boulders. And it's just educating them like, hey, we got to keep a frequent pumping schedule or your milk ducts are going to start shutting down. And the same thing with like just making sure they're staying hydrated and they're eating to keep those milk flowing in the right direction.
That's good advice. That's really good. So here on ParentingU, we talk about earning your degree in exceptional parenting, no studying required. But there might be a little bit of preparation for this test. But even though breastfeeding is natural, y'all have mentioned that it can take some effort. Are there classes or resources or things that new moms can take to just get ready for this?
So here in Baton Rouge, there's many different groups that are all becoming interested in breastfeeding support. So going to those websites, number one. Number two, you can Google anything. And you can Google and you can get 3 or 4 choices, oftentimes from well-renowned children's hospitals in the United States. And so there's a lot of things you can learn online through lactation also.
And just talking with your pediatrician, right? Like you're probably getting ready for interviewing pediatricians, getting ready for the baby to come. And it's something you can talk to them about, I'm sure, even before the baby's here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then remember, too, the OBGYN they're the ones that hopefully will do education with the moms before delivery to help prepare them. And when we trained in pediatrics, we did not get breastfeeding training.
Interesting.
So that's another reason that I went back to learn more, because 20 years ago, if a mom asked me about breastfeeding, I would say, well, I wouldn't really know a whole lot about it. So I think that's so important for physicians or anyone dealing with infants to get their credentials or to learn more about breastfeeding.
Got it. Well, is there anything else that y'all want to tell anyone about breastfeeding, what to expect, how to just make this process as easy as possible?
I would say if you have a problem, reach out to someone. Do not suffer alone, especially when it comes to postpartum depression and all of those things. There are so many people in this community that are willing to help. And we call the lake. We would gladly talk to a mom. I would gladly reach out to them. Come visit me at the hospital. I would love to have you.
That's great.
So we always try to identify a team because it takes a good team for a first time, especially mom to breastfeed. So that team can be the doctor, it can be the sister-in-law, someone who has breastfed before. Because unfortunately, if they're in a home with no breastfeeders, there's a lot of negativity. And they really question themselves, and during that difficult time, they have a tendency to quit. But many moms, they'll get it. If they can stick with it and they have good support, they can get it. So there's very few real contraindications to breastfeeding. So, but they do have to find that team that can help them be successful.
Well, that's great. It sounds like we have to help each other.
Yes.
We have to help each other along.
It takes a village to raise a little one, and you just have to find your village and stick with it.
I love that. Find your village. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I think this is really important information, and I know everyone tuning in will enjoy it as well. Thank you for being with us today. We are so glad to have you. We're with you through all of maternity and beyond, and here at ParentingU, we know it's an amazing journey, and we're glad to be on it together with you. We'll see you next time.